If you're in the country, even those are outside the country, you'll be coming back soon, and you're thinking, I want to get home and call immediately from the airport. And then you come and you call, and even before you said, insufficient credit. Surely. Now that time you didn't have M-Pesa's balance in your wallet. You're
already outside.
Yes. And you're outside, you're stranded.
They won't let you go back inside the thing.
Oh no. So how do you sort yourself out?
See now, if you rewind a couple of days before that, what you would have done to be able to sort yourself out is that you would have, on your mobile, dial *544#. What would have happened? You would have seen a list. On that list, there's a number 4. Next to that number 4 is something that says Go Monthly. You click on the number 4, it comes back to you. And then you see another menu, and then you see all in one. All in one means what? All in one means you will never have to hear that teet, teet, teet again. You're at the airport, you'll be able to call your cab because
you're sorted.
1,000 minutes of talking, 2,000 SMSs, 17 GB of data, free WhatsApp, all of those things, because you selected the one for 2,000 bob, you can get those things.
Yeah.
And Safaricom has understood that you don't want to be at the airport looking for a cab and you can't find one, or calling somebody who can pick you up and you can't reach them, or trying to send a message on WhatsApp and it doesn't happen, or trying to even look for the website of the person who...
Nothing.
It will never happen again because you selected the all-in-one option with Safaricom, and you can go monthly for 30 days. You have access to all of these great things, and you never have to be stranded again. Freedom, I'm telling you, is what you buy. Dial today. We could also help you with 3,000 shillings. You know why? If you dial that and you send us a screenshot of how you subscribe to the Go Monthly all-in-one option, we could give you 3,000 shillings.
Kabisa? Like that. Wanjiru Gikonyo is looking at you like, hi.
It's actually true.
Spice.
Welcome, Wanjiru. How are you doing?
I am very well.
Okay.
I'm well in the Gen Z era because we're in the Gen Z era. We are remembering the fallen heroes. We are remembering those who are still abducted. I think maybe there is 35 people not accounted for. We are remembering those not accounted for. Their bodies in the mortuary that have not gone through the due processing because of a kind of go slow and cover up. We are remembering that we have a constitution. We're a constitutional democracy, and we have leaders who have forgotten that. But despite that, we stand strong, and we say, Viva, power to the people all the time.
Very good. Now, Wanjiru is a transformative governance advocate.
Exactly.
And a coach.
Yes.
Harambee Stars ama Shujaa.
How are they performing? I can own them or
which
not.
Which team are you coaching?
I can't say.
Shujaa.
Who is top of the league so that I can own that one?
Arsenal.
Don't listen to you.
Where?
Welcome, though, Wanjiru.
Thank you very much.
City says hi. He said hi yesterday. Right now he's sleeping.
Tell him my heart is broken.
He is spending his time chilling.
Tell him my heart is broken. We needed to discuss these issues.
He gave me the proverb to give you.
All
the
right.
proverbs for this week are from Senegal. 3 kinds of people die poor. Those who divorce, those who incur debt, and those who move around too much.
CT added that last bit. Okay.
What do you think?
Well, Senegal is a country that has recently gone through a revolution. And they have, I think, a millennial for president, rejected the old guard. And so they're a country we are watching to see how that will develop. Financial literacy is real, man. And so I'll take this. I'll take it. Think about it and see what's applicable and what can be done about it. This one, I'm not going beyond that. When it comes to finances, I'm like, ready to be taught.
That one you agree?
I haven't agreed, ready to be taught. Yes,
moving around too much?
Yes, that one might not apply to me, but it applies to certain parties in our country. Yes. And so we are poor because there are certain people who insist on moving around everywhere, doing nothing useful. Yes, other than making too much noise. So that one I vouch for.
And staying married.
And divorce?
It depends. If you manage to take half or take more than half, then you should be okay.
And sit down in one place.
You should be okay. And it depends on who you married. Yes. Sometimes divorce you might be divorcing Anyway, let me not be flippant about it. Marriage is not about just finances.
So, your name again popped up in the news last week from the Court of Appeal. Big decision. NGCDF, 3 judges of the Court of Appeal say this thing, NG, unconstitutional. Then, in fact, we remembered many years before it became NGCDF, it was CDF, and Wanjiru Gikonyo and others had gone to court and it had been declared unconstitutional. Now, this one has been declared. What is unconstitutional this time?
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a step back.
Yes.
How did we end up in the Court of Appeal? Who took who to the Court of Appeal?
Where to start? Other than to say that advocacy, activism, transformation you play the long game. Because we first went to court in 2011 on the CDF. And like you said, in 2013, we got a resounding judgment. Actually, a landmark judgment. And then our Parliament, in all their lack of wisdom, decided to challenge the High Court's ruling on the constitutionality of CDF. And our argument was CDF was a good idea in its day because at that time, development money went to Nairobi and a few other politically connected areas. So there were parts of this country that had no development. So when Morioki Karoe, the then MP, I think of Kinangop, mooted the CDF, he had a good basis, and he has a very good book where he talks about attending national days and hearing promises about development coming, and it never came. And his people thought he was lying. So a good idea comes at the right time, and CDF was that. But with the passage of the Constitution, this idea of money being spent at the constituency level, money being spent under the care or guidance or patronage or whatever, or chairmanship.
Oversight.
No, they don't. Well, of the MP and undertaking various functions which change depending on the mood of Parliament or depending on the latest court ruling, that was overtaken by devolution because devolution shares money to all parts of the country. And the role of Parliament then becomes to oversight that and to ensure that the money is well spent and to ensure that the laws of devolution are well crafted.
Yeah.
But when they have a vested interest in their own fund that continues to grow as the budget grows, they are distracted. And you've seen Parliament using CDF to blackmail Treasury. They have a perverse incentive to ensure the budget keeps growing so that their 2.5% of the national budget can keep growing. So it really undermines the functional roles, it undermines separation of powers, it undermines the constitutional design of devolution.
Okay.
So, yeah. So maybe the last point is we used public interest litigation, which was provided for in the Constitution of Kenya. It wasn't there before. But Parliament have used their power of their past, their legislative power, to subvert these rulings. So as we get rulings, they change the law and then kind of say, well, we've changed the law, so now it's okay.
Now we are conforming.
Yeah, exactly. But all they are doing is trying to hide this political slush fund.
Okay.
So CDF is good for local governance, but the role of the MP is a problem and they need to get out. And it needs to be spent either at the national level or at the county level. There is no development unit called the constituency.
Okay. Let me ask, because I think then also it plays heavily on what the court decided a couple of days ago. That we had been told already by the committee that the Member of Parliament actually doesn't play a role in terms of how this fund then will be spent. They may have representation during the meetings, but in terms of deciding how, it's really not within the committee. That the Member of Parliament, but we also see that there is still an amount of influence that is played at that level. Now, knowing that, what has the court then said very clearly then that would quash any of that influence or any of that overarching fear that, if we don't do this, we could be in a spot of trouble from the side of the Member of Parliament?
Yeah. And thanks. The court had to dig in between, it's like hidden in between the lines and in between the dots. So if you look at the ruling, you're actually going to see that the court has taken time to unpack the role of the Member of Parliament. So first of all, like I said, they have said that the constituency is not a unit of development. So appropriating money...
This is according to the Constitution?
Yes, because we have two levels of government.
Okay.
We don't have three. And so MPs with the CDF, even the Roads Maintenance Levy Fund, and if you've been listening to them, there are other funds they've been trying to build around this constituency level.
Yeah.
And the court has told them repeatedly that the constituency is not a unit of development. It is an electoral unit. It's not an administrative development unit. The other thing is in this intricate structure where they appoint certain members to the committee, the court has then gone in and said that committee is an implementation body. So to the extent that the Member of Parliament is appointing, then that also constitutes being part of implementation. And members of Parliament have a representative role, they have a legislative role, they have an oversight role. They do not have an implementation role, so that you have separation of powers.
Okay.
So the court has said there is a separation. There needs to be a separation between the executive, between the judiciary, and between Parliament.
Okay.
So that in our democracy, you have checks and balances. They have also said that when money cannot be appropriated for this NGCDF fund, prior to the division of revenue, because what it means is that national government is using this provision called national interest to hive off money that could go to the counties. So this has been litigated and judged. It was determined also in the Supreme Court with regard to the CDF. But it's parliamentary impunity. Why is Parliament? The question becomes, in fact, you could flip it and say, what problem is Parliament trying to cure?
We'll come into that and see what CDF has done, what arguments we're hearing from those who are in Parliament, those who support CDF. But I just want to take a step back. After the first declaration that CDF was unconstitutional, then there was the rewriting of the law and the redesign of this. It was called NGCDF. So it was the national government saying, we as the national government have development responsibilities to do. And responsibility
we as who?
As national government.
That's a very amorphous term, and the ruling actually says it's a problem to have a fund that is so obscure.
Hold on, let me finish.
In its objects. What do you mean by national government?
There are two levels of government.
Do you mean executive?
There are two levels of government.
Do you mean the executive or Parliament?
Hold on. So there are two levels of government.
There are two levels of government.
So there's a county government,
exactly,
and there's a national government. Both have the development functions.
Functional roles.
Yes.
Let's be clear in language.
Okay. Functional roles of development. The national government comes and says, now, for us to, how we want to do our development, we want to take our development down to levels. And let's create the National Government Constituency Development Fund, just to mirror what was there before. That's why they created the NGCDF, right? The NGCDF.
Let's stop there. You're totally misrepresenting.
What happened?
The national government did not create CDF. Parliament did. At no point did national government ever create CDF.
Who took the bill to Parliament?
It was a member of Parliament.
Who?
Like I said, Muriuki Karue.
CDF. NGCDF. When it was renamed NGCDF,
there was a committee of Parliament headed by Moses Lenoset. I'm wondering whether the first one was by Ekwe Ethuro and then Lenoset, I think, who are the chairs of what is called the constituency fund. It's CFC. There's a constituency fund committee, which is the parliamentary committee that kind of oversights CDF. Now, that committee is the one that is tasked, reviews the law. It reviews the law.
So it
does the public engagement.
Yes.
It crafts the law, and then it tables the law. And then they have a debate inside Parliament about, should we appropriate this money for ourselves?
Or not?
Should we increase the amount? And then they all say yes, and they pass the bill. And then, if you note in our suit, the CS of Treasury and the Attorney General sided with us. They sided with us and said, we support the petitioners on this one, that CDF is unconstitutional. So I do not know whose advice Parliament is listening to.
Okay, let's look at...
Not the AGs.
Okay.
And not the National Treasury.
No, the Treasury was with us. For once, we cross hairs with the Treasury quite a lot. But on this one, we were like, yeah, stick to the law.
Okay, so the law is... I mean, I hate to say it, but here it goes. The law is very clear now about this. Yeah. Right? Coming from this ruling. But then we also know that there will probably, you can be guaranteed that there will be backlash to this from members of Parliament, especially because what it does, we've seen that NGCDF, whether they sit on committees for decision or not, that it allows them to create their own kind of fiefdoms in terms of what then they're able to do. For them to let go of this is going to be a very, very serious fight. What does it portend from where you see? Because I don't imagine that you would have gone to court not taking into consideration the backlash that would come as a result of a ruling like this.
Well, no, I think when there is injustice and injustice prevails or is being advanced, when you have forms of oppression, we have a duty to resist. And when you do in your resistance, of course, you'll do a bit of scenario setting, but you have a duty to resist. You anticipate there will be backlash.
Yeah.
The backlash is likely to be more on the judiciary. And we therefore cannot say, well, we can't challenge CDF and ask the judiciary to make to proclaim itself on the constitution for fear of backlash from Parliament. That is a national condition of us having Parliament and an executive who do not want to who do not subscribe to rule of law. And that is the problem we are trying to cure. That is why Gen Zs were on the street resisting impunity. So the backlash comes with the territory. But more to what you're saying, might we have a scenario where they recraft and keep recrafting? We go to the Supreme Court, because with CDF, we had a good ruling, went to the appeal, not such a good ruling, went to the Supreme Court, had a resounding ruling that killed CDF. But in the meantime, they've then recrafted, they have NGCDF.
Yes.
And they, then now we are in appeal and, expecting...
There's a next step.
The next step.
Still open, the Supreme Court.
Of course it is. But we learned something. Number one is our remedies were crafted very resoundingly. The way this bill, the ruling is crafted, the wording on the termination of this arrangement is replete. I do not believe they have anywhere to hide. Whatever they craft will likely be unconstitutional and contrary to this, because the court went into the detail of into what they called the level of government, the issue of subsidiarity, because they were arguing that, national government can then, undertake its projects. So they've been very clear on the level of government. They've been very clear on subsidiarity. They've been very clear on the functional roles. They've been very clear on separation of powers. They've been very clear that not only the CDF, but other funds like it. So now we go for NGAF, which is a bit touchy because we want money to go into gender. But we don't want that money to go through the MP, the women rep or whoever. They're going for the MCA's fund, the Ward Development Fund. And of course that puts to rest the quest for senators to get their own fund. Because the oversight role of Parliament is conducted within Parliament, within the committees. And the committees are well resourced. In fact, members of Parliament are well resourced. They have offices, they have constituency offices, they have good salaries, they have all these allowances that allow them to move up and down. They have
budgets for that, for travel and all.
They have budgets to do all their work. So the way we framed the remedies, and we're assisted by Dr. Mutaha Kangu, who is, of course, a devolution expert who has advised us right through. And when we looked at things up to the Supreme Court, we were like, what did we miss? And he helped us develop a paper on remedies, that when you go to the court, you need remedies that assist the court to make a very clear decision. So one, the language of the ruling is clear on the unconstitutionality. It's also clear there is no space. So what we expect to see is a backlash against the court. But that's not only because of CDF. That is going to be because the court has pronounced itself on several of the unconstitutional and irregular schemes of Kenya Kwisha, such as, of course, there was SHIF. SHIF is now, I believe, implemented pending the determination in court. There was the housing levy that had a lot of back and forth. Pardon?
The Finance Act.
The Finance Act is the big one. So we have a regime that is trying to work outside the law. And, it's hard to understand why. Because the law gives a lot of room to execute whatever development plans you have. But possibly because of the haste to get into deals like this Adani deal, where you bring in people through special purpose or kind of single-sourced PPPs and all this real abuse of our laws. And because Parliament, in its wisdom, enacted a law that allows government to privatize, hey, let's be very clear. Parliament is going to come for the judiciary. because we have a regime, the Zakayo regime, that wants to privatize, asset strip, and own assets that belong to Kenya through shadowy companies. This happened with Safaricom during the privatization. There's a company called Mobitelea. And try though we did, and I remember I remember David D speaking up about who holds shares in that company. Because all you need is to take a floundering public asset, sell it off to a private company, get some politically connected people to buy shares in that company, so that they will now become beneficiaries of whatever investment is going to be made. Because in the privatization process, there's also money from government that comes in to facilitate the process. There's also now you have bought shares into a company that is being bought out internationally. So really, you are buying shares into a company for free.
So in this Court of Appeal, what were you? Respondent, applicant?
We are the key petitioner.
You are the petitioner in the Court of Appeal?
Right.
Okay. So this is what happened. The court declared it unconstitutional. Now, since then, we've seen there are people who said, but we have seen the work of CDF. Actually, even before this judgment, MPs in Parliament had one time had a session where they were saying, look, if we start reducing our budget, it's better that we cut the money that goes to counties. Because these county governors, all we are seeing is just corruption scandals left, right, and center. And look at CDF. Look what CDF has done. Look how many schools CDF has built. Look how many police stations and police posts CDF has built. Look how many children are in school courtesy of CDF bursary. CDF is transformative. You're a transformative governance advocate. Do you agree?
Yes and no.
In principle?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I agree that CDF is transformative, but as the court says, and as a constitutional democracy, it must fit within the design of the Constitution. So I would go back to 2013, when Parliament was redesigning CDF for the first time. What should they have done? And what did we ask them to do? We told them, number one, and the court has said it very clearly, that funds follow function. We told them the CDF needs to clarify which function. And if it says CDF is for national functions, because it's a national fund, for instance, education and security, because those are the funds that then have local level. Because CDF was designed as a local infrastructure fund, very innovative at the time. So if it was going to go build classrooms and police posts, which it needed to because there's a deficit, why doesn't the law just say that? And then it would be channeled through the county policing authority, which is provided in the Police Act, but has never been operationalized because the Uhuru Ruto government and now the Kenya Kwisha government would not allow, we have to call it what it is. We have to call it what it is.
What it is
would
Kenya
never
Kwanza.
Allow. Well, that's what they call themselves, but what we
that's
see...
That's what is registered.
Well, you can also speak about...
registered.
This is outcome-based reporting. I'm talking about the outcomes and the impacts on the lives of Kenyans.
What you see.
Kwisha. So one key thing, when you see this brute police force, there was a report in 2016 by IPOA. There is a report from last year, the Maraga Task Force, asking how do we reform our police because it's replete with corruption. Even they know. Because there are huge budgets that go into the security sector, that yet there are parts of this country that aren't policed. We've got command control. We've got a coercive colonial hangover of a police force. I mean, there are young people, young males, especially young urban, poor, low-income males, fear the police more than they fear thugs in town, because police shake down people on a good day, let alone the recent protests. So part of the problem we have with Parliament failing to align CDF properly is Parliament needed to have sat and said, okay, we have a new constitution that envisions a police force based on human rights that protects the people, that is people-centered, what kind of laws do we pass so that we can realize that? That is the role of Parliament.
Okay.
It's not the role of Parliament to say, oh, we now don't have police posts, so let's go and build them. If they had done that, they could then have channeled the CDF through that, and then there's another structure called community policing. Do you know, I saw this in the Maraga Task Force report and I was shocked that in trying to restructure the administration police and the national police, the role of community policing was removed and has been a gap, which is why you saw crime, local crime going up. So in an attempt to kind of settle the political squabbles between these arms of the police, a gap was left. Now, the role of Parliament is to come back and say, hey, guys, we are hearing that crime is up. We are seeing that there were reforms that were done 2 years ago and they didn't work. Can we restructure? But instead of doing that, because Parliament has a vested interest in the fund, they would rather build police posts themselves without providing the community policing. So why do you have a police post that then doesn't have deployment? Because if you look at the budget, IMLU did an analysis of the budget. It's a pittance gets to the police station. So actually part of the police were very happy to work with IMLU on this project where they were saying, yes, please, can we get budgets so that the OCS is able to fuel the car and not have
ideally, this money should have gone through the structures of the police so that if it constructs a police station, it properly resources that station. What
I'm saying is, one, we would have wanted to keep the principle that it's a community-based fund.
Okay.
So the lowest level of community of the community in the security police sector is community policing. So you would have to find a way, because you have to design, how do the community then have a say in this fund? Well, how do they, one, you have to set up community policing structures democratically and effectively. You then have to have a structure where they identify needs, where these needs are then quantified and put in some sort of plan. And that means you then have to set up the county policing authorities that have never been set up. So what am I saying? Instead of Parliament fixing the police sector by looking at the law and setting up the institutions that are meant to be there, they went to build structures.
Have they worked?
Do you see what?
Have they worked?
Well, they have built structures, but if you look at, there was a report, a World Bank report, I think in 2021, that said over half of CDF projects are incomplete and unutilized because they're outside of a planning framework. So you can build a classroom. Even, let's say even you manage not to steal because Parliament doesn't report. There hasn't been an evaluation report of CDF projects because Parliament is the oversight. See, they know this information in their own mind.
What do you mean?
Kenyans don't know. They don't evaluate.
The CDF board reports to Parliament.
Reports what? Have you looked at the reports?
Are you saying that the CDF board has not produced a report?
No, I'm saying they do produce reports. Okay. But in amending the Act, they lowered the threshold of reporting. We used to be able to get lists of CDF projects online from the board level. So we could do our social audits without asking anybody.
The question I'm asking...
They do not post lists of projects online. You cannot even get those lists at the CDF office. They had to, they were required to produce an evaluation report, I think, every 3 years. That provision was removed. And it was replaced with a statutory audit report. Statutory audit report means we received so many billions and we spent so many billions. The devil is in the detail.
Just the status.
They have reduced transparency and accountability because they are Parliament, they have power of the law, and because they don't want to account. Matters they'll be accounting to themselves, notwithstanding.
Allow me to pick at something that you said, because I think it is extremely important. We talk about the fact that there's certain things within these tenets of representation, legislation, and oversight that are supposed to be carried out by Parliament, right? But the questions as to why, let's use the police post that you speak of, the questions as to why security is lacking in a particular area, the questions as to what frameworks are supposed to be put in place, which now comes under legislation, and to find out really what the issues are in that particular area comes under representation. And if money has been spent or not spent, that comes under oversight. But we say that, from what you're saying now, that those things have not been done. And in an attempt to then cover up the inefficiency of those three tenets, that what we do is we say, let's put up a police post and it will deal with that issue. And there we can see the funds from NGCDF, in this case now being used for that. But it is not actually doing the work of these three levels that's supposed to be done.
2 levels. Bingo.
That's what we are saying. So CDF has been used over time as a cover-up for the work that is not being done at the parliamentary level. So far?
Bingo.
Okay. Do you think that by the removal of this fund, that it will force, and I use force very, carefully here, members of parliament and parliament as a body to actually do this work that they're meant to? Because if we're saying that the fund is there and it helps people essentially not do their job, basically, will the removal of this fund then ensure that the things that you're actually supposed to be doing within the framework of these three levels, oversight, representation, legislation, is actually done?
Do and your difficult questions. Yes and no. In one way, Parliament will have to contend itself with how do we demonstrate to the public that we are working. Because right now, CDF is populist. In fact, CDF decampaigns them. Over 60% of MPs go home every election.
On account of CDF?
We believe it's on account of CDF.
Because people look at development.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that brings in the second part to this. The expectations of the public are also a challenge. And MPs have told us this. Look at, and in fact they say, all those legislators who work so hard at national level don't get voted back. Yeah. And it's true.
Yeah.
So the point we made to them is, you don't legislate an anomaly. That is what civic education is for. The problem is, we have a population that needs to see a project, and they don't understand the role of an MP.
Yes.
So educate them on the role of the MP so that they can understand who's supposed to develop the project.
Who should do that, though? Sorry.
The civic education.
Okay, sorry.
Under the law, Parliament is required to pass a national law, and counties are required to do civic education. It doesn't happen. In fact, it was killed when Anne Waiguru was in devolution minister and was very hostile towards devolution. It's amazing that she's now a governor and
chair.
Yeah, and chair of the COG. But this goes to speak to our political leaders have been very hostile towards devolution, and the reason is, properly implemented, devolution is power to the people. So when Parliament fights devolution, when Senate fights, what anybody who fights devolution is actually saying, we the politicians are the ones who know. They don't know how to deal with the citizenry that know. That is why government has been so hostile to Gen Z, because they are like, how dare you come and question, and not only question, evidence-based. We are telling you even what you didn't know. They are not able to deal with that, yet our constitution anticipates that citizen. So we've got one, and now we'd say that, whereas when we were starting, we really had a sense where citizens loved CDF. And in fact, when we went to court, we knew we are going against the citizens. That is why we didn't do a lot of citizen mobilization. We had wanted to. We knew we'll lose. But much as they love CDF, they hate the role of the MP in CDF. So our contention and our proposal to Parliament was, make it a community development fund that can either go to the counties for local infrastructure developments, and it could still be on national projects, or it could be on county projects, but And we even gave them models. They have, Bolivia has one, Rwanda has one. These funds that really go to build community, and I know, Latiff, you're very active in the Residents Association at the local level. It's really saying that organized groups that are accountable will then be able to marshal a fund, and there are some mandates given to them because sovereignty, Article 1, Article 173, 174, and I think 175 talk about collectively about self-governance. The development is about the people. It's not dependency, government's idea.
It's people deciding.
Yeah.
People deciding and having
acting.
The wherewithal to act.
So now, where we are at right now, you've seen members of parliament going and saying, look at what we have done with CDF. We have built the school. We've upgraded our schools. For example, Chairman of Budget, Ednah Nyoro, was in the news over the weekend, said, look at what we have done in Keharo constituency. We have built schools, we have upgraded schools. After very many years of Kenya's independence, we still had schools, classrooms that didn't have on the floors. Now they have nice proper tiles on the floor, they have toilets, a proper sanitation, and there is a way in which they're saying, we're even putting money towards school feeding program and all, and they are reducing the burden of households in taking their children to school.
Great.
This is what CDF has been able to do. Because we have allowed the people to make their decision, we are just guiding them. Okay?
Great.
Now, how do you counter that? How do you go to Keharo today and say, all right, we need to rethink this CDF thing?
And yes, I've heard Didi Nyoro does a very good job. There are many MPs who've done a sterling job. And there are many that really just steal that money. And there are many who wound up in court. And if EACC was more effective, I believe there would be very many more. So what we are saying is, let's learn. And this is the tragedy of there not being evaluations. Parliament does not evaluate itself. Development must be evaluated. So let's evaluate what's working. Let's maintain what's working. Let's get the MP out and let's have a community development fund and let's ask, what does that look like? Because the way Parliament is going is, and the court talked about it, they are now becoming another arm of implementation. Yeah, they are another arm of government. They're the oversight arm, but now they're becoming another arm of implementation. They have the roads maintenance levy. That's decided at the constituency level. We have to go for that one. And so if there are failures in the executive, whose job is it to ensure those failures are dealt with?
If the
Parliament.
it's supposed to be Parliament.
It's supposed to be. But Parliament are too distracted implementing to sort this out. So we are losing 97.5% of the budget isn't oversighted because Parliament is so busy with their 2.5% doing the job that the executive should do. But there is a role for a fund, because a fund has a easier
direct connection with the people.
Exactly. But why not look at models like Rwanda had, like Bolivia had, a community development fund? I believe 10 years plus into devolution, it is time. The function, there's a function 14, Schedule 2, the Constitution, function 14. I don't read as well as quickly and as effectively as my sister here. It says, ensuring the role of the county government, function 14 is ensuring and coordinating the participation of communities and locations in governance at the local level and assisting communities and location to develop the administrative capacity for effective exercise of the functions and powers and participation in governance at the local level. This means that they are supposed to be structures. It's not supposed to be ad hoc, come tell me what you want. They are supposed to be structures, whether they are residents associations.
At community and location level.
At village, yes. So yes, location would even be lower. Is that lower than the village? To the lowest level. This means empowered citizens who exercise their sovereignty, who exercise self-governance. This fund could be designed to progressively realize that. It means Public participation struggles in this country because politicians believe they own the public. And it's not just parliament. It is also county members of assembly. They burst into public participation meetings. So we need to get out. We need to shift from a dependency model where parliamentarians own and kind of use and give handouts to the public, to an empowered public that, as the Constitution aspires.
Okay.
So for that, let's design a fund. Let's put the civic education around it. Let's agree on where it will be spent. Is it going into bursaries? Is it going into security? Let it be evidence-based. There has to be accountability. And then let's help Parliament do their oversight job better, because maybe we wouldn't be having scandals in all major Kenya Kwisha projects if Parliament was on the job. Yes, but Parliament isn't on the job because their CDF has become a bribe.
They are doing another job.
It is a bribe, like, keep quiet, you eat your money, let us eat our money. Who is paying for this? That is why Gen Z were on the streets, because we are financing corruption with high taxes and lack of service delivery. We don't have money for, you've seen in yesterday's paper, I saw HIV because of the change, funds that were withdrawn, and the government's not able to meet that. 62 or something % of our health budget still depends on donors.
Yes.
We call ourselves sovereign, and then where we do have decent expenditure locally, the agriculture, we have Parliament passing this crop management bill to try and license farmers. So the sector that is working, that government is disinvesting, because actually I think the allocations to the agriculture sector is possibly tending towards 3%. It was around 4% under the Kenya, under Uhuru Ruto. Now it's tending towards 3%. So, I mean, the lies of Kenya Kwisha are just phenomenal because this was actually a manifesto promise.
Wanjiru.
And they've gone opposite. Then, so you're reducing investment in key sectors. What does that mean? You're passing the burden onto taxpayers.
Yep.
At the same time, you're bringing in expensive, corrupt, dodgy companies to manage these functions at an overpriced cost. This is SGR all over again. So we have there was a presidential advisor.
In 30 seconds.
Presidential advisor advising Uhuru Ruto in around 2013, 14, 15. I met him at a couple of events, and he said he's advised them to keep away from large infrastructure because it gobbles up all the money. It creates opportunities for corruption. And he was Japanese, and he said the way Japanese grew is because they invested in modular that uses local technology, that allows small level procurement at all levels. So things are going very wrong in this country. Let us now start fixing them one by one. And here we are starting to fix by putting Parliament back in their proper role oversight. What do we need to do? We need to maybe re-engage Parliament and see if we can speak some sense and tell them we are underdeveloped.
We can see you. Plus, of all,
there's a big job as well of engaging the citizens.
Agreed.
The civic education bit is a big one. Thank you, Wanjiru, for joining us today. Come again soon.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your